Joining us now, retired firefighter Sam Eaton and fired, I hate saying that, Chief Stephen Davis. They're fighting back against these mandates through Operation Freedom of Choice, which is huge. Gentlemen, so good to see you. Thank you. So first off, thank you so much for what you do anyway. I mean, just your day-to-day job and I mean, like literally running into burning buildings. I mean, that takes a lot of courage. But then also, you're risking your livelihoods, you're risking your security, and in some instances, you're even risking your reputations, because we know how the press can be, by taking a stand against this. So thank you for doing so.
Thanks for having us, Dana. Good evening to you.
Yes, good evening.
Of course.
You're dead on.
Yeah. I wanted to get your reaction and whichever, Stephen or Sam, however, Stephen, I can start with you and then go to Sam. I wanted to get your reaction to, I'm going to talk to you about your individual instances and what led you to this position. But with one of the headlines that we're hearing this morning now, for these cities that have these mandates in effect, they're begging for volunteer firefighters to come in because you have a number of firehouses that have to be closed, like in huge cities like New York. That is incredibly dangerous. And I wanted to get your reaction to that. Stephen, I'll start with you.
Well, it's insane that we're seeing this in New York City. I mean, this could actually take over in the nation. And what's really bad about this is, if we don't have firefighters filling firehouses, who is going to make those response? Who is going to be responding out to those homes, to those communities? And I don't think people understand this, as when we start eliminating people's jobs that serve and protect, or the brave that go in, you're not going to have these people come to your communities anymore and save your loved ones, take them to the hospital, treat them at the hospital, protect them from criminals. You talk about it in your book about having the right to have your 2A, and those people in New York don't have that. So what are you going to do if you're firing firefighters, you're firing police officers, you're firing nurses? You're not going to have the community to protect.
That's a really good point. Yeah, very good point. And Sam, too, the way that I hear some of these politicians talk, they're like, oh, well, we can just bring in some people to replace these firefighters. I'm just, not to say anything bad about those people, but I kind of want someone trained, when I'm going through, like if we're dealing with an emergency, whether it's a fire, whether it's, whatever, a first responder issue, I kind of want someone trained. That's a job that you need to have a developed set of skills for, correct?
Absolutely, 100%. One of the things we rely on extremely in the fire service is our experience. And taking case in point here, Chief Davis, he's a well-read, a well-studied battalion chief and leader. You take him off the force, you're automatically losing the ability to properly protect not just the public, but also our own personnel. When you lose people of that credibility in the fire service, it automatically lowers the safety on the scene and makes our responders, our firefighters, our law enforcement, all much more suspect to something dangerous happening. So dead on, it's not just an impact on the public, which is absolutely our priority, but it also affects our ability to do it in a safe way and protect ourselves.
Yeah, Stephen, tell me about the situation that you found yourself in, because you ended up losing your position because of these mandates, and also they were expecting you. I was reading about the legalities of it and unlawful discipline, and there were a lot of things that were involved in your particular story. Tell people who may not be familiar, because sadly there are so many of these instances happening now, but tell us about your situation and what you stood up to, and then of course the price you had to pay for it.
So the price I paid was I was ultimately terminated. Now, sitting in that meeting before, when I was relieved of duty that evening around 10 o'clock, it never occurred to me that I was going to lose my job. I did think I would be suspended. I even said that to my supervisor. I felt that I was going to be suspended for not following a direct order. But I had mentioned in that discussion that this was an unlawful order, that what we were doing to everybody in our department was unlawful. And I tried to explain those things. I went through several things that I could prove and had evidence that was unlawful, and those are going to all be in court. We're going to show those in court, the evidence where they're unlawful. But I have, for the last 2 years, almost 2 years, been taking concerns from men and women in my battalion, and I've been in 2 different battalions, so roughly about 11, 12 stations, and I've heard the concerns, I've heard the stresses, I've heard the things that are happening in these people's lives before the mandate came down. I've heard them not sure what's going to happen with COVID, stress about, people not being able to find food, supplies, those things early on during the pandemic. And then we fast forward to 2021, and we're told in August by the mayor of Orange County that if we did not get this vaccination, you were going to be terminated. Those were his words, that you were going to be terminated. And so when I was driving around to all the stations in my battalion, I was fielding those concerns, and I was listening to over 55, 60 people telling me, men and women, saying that they were concerned about losing their job. They were concerned about getting this vaccination, that there wasn't enough evidence, data behind it, that they thought that they would be injured because those aren't being reported. And no one was listening to those things. So when I brought that forward, a couple months later said, look, you are violating their civil rights. These individuals, the mayor has given us the opportunity to take a religious exemption, a medical exemption. And those people were on the list with religious exemptions. And we were going to give them written reprimands. We were going to give them oral warnings. We were making people test weekly. And these were people that had religious exemptions, and you're making them test? What if they're saying that that's against their religion? What if that's part of their religious exemption, and you're making them do that? And these are the things that I try to warn my department with. These are things that I try to say, listen, you guys are getting ready to violate. You guys have already violated for the last 2 days these civil rights, not to mention a Florida statute and some other things that we've found. But those are the things I try to relay that information. And it was just in one ear, out the other. And ultimately, I was relieved of duty. And about 2 weeks later, they terminated me.
Wow, unbelievable. And you talk about the exemptions that have been offered, and as well. And what gets me is that, from what I understand, Orange County firefighters, everybody was on the same page. Like, yeah, these are unlawful orders. You can't go out and enforce something that's unlawful like this, and yet still you had to pay the consequence for not following a mandate, especially one coming down from the federal level that is simply a press release and hasn't even gone through the proper protocol to even be recognized CFR through OSHA. I mean, it's insane. Sam, I wanted to talk this because the website Operation Freedom of Choice, there are a lot of people, Stephen was just talking about, all of the people that he works with that are in this position. They're looking at, I want to serve my community. I want to do what I set out to do, but at the same time, I want to be able to make my own risk assessment and make my own decision. Or maybe these are people who already, like I said, you all never were in lockdown. Everybody else was, but you all weren't. You guys went from being heroes to now being treated like zeros. I wanted to get your thoughts on what this means for people who they find themselves as first responders in this awful position. And a lot of them feel isolated and alone and a little scared to speak out about this because, they see what Stephen's gone through and they don't know if they were ready for that yet. So tell us about Operation Freedom of Choice and what you hope happens here.
So our organization formed about 2 months before Stephen's situation, and it really was born out of his department's area, also the Palm Beach County area. Firefighters starting to unite on the issue and the topic of the fact that this might actually be coming down the road. This is before, it blew our mind when he got terminated. But honestly, we saw writing on the wall, and at ground zero was his department. The Orange County was what we were all looking at. And I'm talking about departments all the way from Miami-Dade, all the way up to Jacksonville, Panhandle, Clearwater, east to west, north to south in the state of Florida, a red state, good gosh, with a great governor, Governor DeSantis. But there was a leader here, Jason Wheat in Orange County. And we looked to him. We wanted to connect with him, and we started to begin what we do in the fire service. Our brotherhood, our sisterhood, is to start unite on these issues and start to come up with a plan to start approaching these issues. We certainly we're facing any mandates directly in the Palm Beach County area, and we're grateful for that. But at the same time, we felt like as Orange County goes, so goes the rest of the state. If a mayor or a city council or a county commission is watching Orange County to see how they handle their personnel, how they handle it, and start to apply that same principle, we were fearful that might happen. So we were working with Orange County from the get-go, and we're now connected, like I said, all the way across the state, and hoping to move even further to a national level on this.
I hope so. Thank you both so much for what you do, for not just for first responders, but for everybody else and for taking a stand on this. OperationFreedomOfChoice.org. The website's there in the lower third. Stephen Davis, Sam Eaton, thank you both so much. Good to see you. And we'll follow that case as well, Stephen, and we'll get updates from you as they develop. Thank you.